First, I jumped at the opportunity to create a talk about my reflective self-exploration journey. However, I found it challenging to identify a key point of inflection in my life. Making it appear insurmountable, I viewed countless TED Talks delivered with eloquence, brilliance, and captivation, leaving me questioning who would possibly want to hear my story. There is no single event in my life that deserves focus over all others. Mine is an examination about how life brought me to where I am today, about a resilient mindset and how it's helped me adapt to life's curveballs, how important gratitude is to a positive mindset, self-actualization and creativity, and how I manage my well-being. This is what I remember. I am a son, brother, husband, father, scientist and lawyer. I was born in the United States, Minneapolis, Minnesota, a place known for the Mayo Clinic and 3M, birthplace of F. Scott Fitzgerald, Bob Dylan, Judy Garland and Prince, and renowned for its freezing cold winters. I lived there with my dad, mum and brother, all who were born in Sydney, Australia, and moved to the United States in 1970. My parents were educated, trained, and distinguished themselves as dedicated medical professionals. My dad studied at private school in Sydney and graduated with first-class honours in physics, and later attended the University of Sydney under scholarship, gaining a Bachelor of Medicine and Surgery, achieving second-class honours. He was later admitted as a Fellow of the Royal Australasian College of Physicians. My dad initially worked as an intern at St Vincent's Hospital and later worked under scholarship and subsequently held positions at the Repatriation General Hospital, Prince Henry Hospital, and the University of Minnesota and the University of Kentucky. My dad was a highly intelligent student and physician. Vocationally, my mum was professionally trained and worked as a registered nurse at St Vincent's Hospital, actually where my parents met, and as a drug and alcohol therapist, and later worked as a full-time stay-at-home parent, significantly important roles that I would later come to appreciate. For the most part, I grew up on a farm about 29 kilometres outside of Minneapolis, where my family, while working their normal day jobs, bred American quarter horses, a breed of horse known for their excellent sprinting in races over a quarter mile, show jumping, dressage and hunting. Growing up, I felt shy and somewhat introverted, though I had a small group of good friends. This helped me value quality relationships, learn independence, and be comfortable spending time with myself. As I grew up, I have many fond memories of attending school in a rural Minnesota environment. Though after living in Minnesota for about 10 years, my parents decided to move to another state, about 1,400 kilometres away. For context, that's about the distance between Sydney and Adelaide. I was quite unsettled by the possibility of moving away from my childhood home and from my friends when I was only 10 years old. I found it quite terrifying. At the time, my dad travelled to and from Minnesota to Kentucky to explore new work opportunities. During one of these trips, it turns out that he met someone else with whom he formed a relationship, which more or less resulted in my parents' separation and divorce. One lasting memory is how anxious and unsettled I felt about the disintegration of my parents' relationship and our family. This unsurprisingly resulted in my parents' divorce and culminated in contested court proceedings during which I gave evidence. The judge asked me to tell him who I wanted to live with. Instinctively, I chose my mother, a decision I later came to understand, which was an alignment with the so-called good parent against the bad parent. Not long after this time, following my parents' divorce, We moved back to Australia, much further away than Kentucky, and this is where my transition and lessons about resilience really began. A short time after we arrived, my dad committed suicide. When I was about 11 years old, he was found dead, hanging in his garage. There was no note, as is usually or popularly portrayed on film or in television. Although I never exactly know why he did what he did, I guess it was likely the result of depression, anxiety, alcohol abuse, as well as grief and guilt associated with the breakdown of his family. The impact of my dad's depression and suicide profoundly influenced my outlook on life. My dad's death should have been the seminal rite of passage into adulthood. You know, no more safety net, time to grow up, time to say goodbye to the boy I had been. Ordinarily, this rite of passage is a sign, but I wasn't ready. To give this some perspective, I remember a caring family environment with a lot of precious memories about my dad. And my dad was an admired, highly respected and intelligent medical physician. Following his death, I was given a tome of his professional papers and works, signed by a number of professional colleagues, noting him as a fine physician, teacher, scientist and friend. But how could someone with so many talents, decide to give it all away? Was I responsible in some way? If so, how? How did my decision to live with my mother impact my father's state of mind, mental health, and ultimately his decision to take his own life? Do I feel guilty? Should I feel responsible? After arriving in Australia, I attended a co-ed Catholic primary school. I found it really challenging to fit in. I felt quite different and spoke with a distinct American accent for which I was persistently teased. To this day, people remark about how I don't have an accent, and I respond that I learned to lose it. It was teased out of me. Although we previously visited Australia on a number of occasions, being fully immersed in Australian culture felt like a race to fit in, to establish my identity, to make friends and grow into a teenager. I tried really hard to learn to fit in and how best to communicate. Around that time, my mother remarried, and then I attended an all-boys Catholic boarding school in Sydney. At school, I recognised a number of different kinds and groups of people, and I tended to have a number of friends and move between groups, continually trying to adapt to them and see how my fellow students interacted. Although I didn't appreciate it at the time, the boarding school community and involvement in religious education provided me with a strong, reliable group of friends and a balanced foundation upon which I developed my personal identity and sense of morals and ethics. On the other hand, my home life and mother's second marriage was an unhappy one. My stepfather was fundamentally absent and not a respectable role model from whom I could learn with and grow as an adult. Not long after that, my mum and stepdad divorced. As a child of divorce, I really started to pay attention to others early, particularly my mum. I developed a deep appreciation of my mum's strength, dedication and work ethic as a single working mother. I was and continue to be sincerely grateful for all the hard work she did to put me and my brother through boarding school. Her strong character is one of the main influences on me as a person and how I try to be the best parent I can for my daughters. By the age of 25, I lived in about 7 or 8 different places and I never really stayed in one place for a long period of time. I feel like I've never had that opportunity to live and belong somewhere and be part of a community for a long period of time. Until now, where I've lived with my wife and children for about 10 or 11 years. Being part of a community is important to belonging. and the realization of identity. As a husband and a parent of 2 daughters, I reflect on how my parents functioned as a couple and as parents, and how they were brought up and how my parents brought me up. When thinking about their upbringing and how they developed as spouses and as parents, I reflect on my relationships with my wife and my children. Which brings me to a really important topic of happiness. What is happiness and what makes me happy? Is it fulfillment, contentment, or peace of mind? Where does my happiness come from? Can I simply choose happiness? Is it a mindset or a positive choice about mental well-being and vitality? I reflect about my parents' choices and how they profoundly affected my choices. My introspective process has led me to regularly consider a Charles Cooley quote. I'm not who you think I am. I'm not who I think I am. I am who I think you think I am. It's a reflection of how we appear to others and how we imagine others view each of us. Identity or self being the result of learning to see ourselves through what we perceive to be the perception of others. Communication. I was not brought up to openly talk about my feelings or about how I feel. One of my main focuses is communication and recognizing and naming my feelings and communicating how I feel with others, and being aware of other people's feelings and communicating with them about their needs and wants. How can I or we better communicate? One of the best books I've read was by an acclaimed actor, Alan Alda, who shared powerful lessons about the art and science of communication and how to improve how they relate to others using improvisation, storytelling, and the innate ability to read what's going on in the minds of others. With levity and honesty, he passionately explained the effectiveness of communication techniques and the compelling case for clarity, communication, and empathy. The book reveals what it means to be an outstanding communicator and how we can communicate better with our friends, with our families, and with our professional colleagues. I've identified a number of risks in my life. According to Harvard medical studies, when a parent is depressed, the likelihood increases of his or her children also developing this mood disorder. Also, a Johns Hopkins medicine study shared investigations about how the loss of a parent to suicide makes children more likely to die by suicide themselves and increases the risk of developing a major psychiatric disorder. Additionally, a Harvard Public Health Review recently noted the intergenerational effects of alcoholism and behavioural risks considered, with the higher risk of becoming addicted to alcohol due to genetic or neurological predispositions. And as a lawyer, I've considered recent research by the Black Dog Institute outlining how lawyers experiencing alarmingly high incidence of anxiety and depression and are more likely to use alcohol or other substances to reduce anxiety and depression. Although I've encountered my own hurdles, I've tackled the challenges through self-awareness, self-actualization, and positive action. Which brings me to mental well-being. To me, mental health and well-being is more than just the absence of mental illness. Mental health is what happens to each of us through our experiences, which is formulated by a series of moments that cause us how to think, feel, act, and behave. It is our state of well-being in which we realise our abilities and how to cope with the stresses of life, to work productively and fruitfully and contribute to our communities with positive influence. I regularly check in to manage my mental state and watch out for the common signs of things like anxiety and depression. How do I manage my own mental health? I focus on positive, active interventions, including exercise, meditation, good nutrition, positive personal relationships, positive self-talk, and journaling. In conclusion, I subscribe to a health and happiness based on 5 principles of the SPIRE model: spiritual, physical, intellectual, relational, and emotional. Every day I focus on continual improvement, learning and growth, all through love, growth and contribution. I embrace a stoic mindset and the values of gratitude, optimism and positivity. My Socratic dialogue is based on the reflection which promotes independent, reflective and critical thinking. As I've developed my own mental health and well-being tools, I believe resilience together with positive self-talk and compassion are critically important to learning, progress and ultimately success. Finally, I don't believe in a deterministic theory that all events, including our actions, are determined by causes other than our own free will. In retrospect, if any one of the events in my life did not occur, I would not be who and where I am today. And in fact, I'm grateful for everyone and everything that has shaped my life experience. But I'm not an expert. However, that's what works for me.